Hi, everybody. It's so great to see all of you. My name is Alexandra Walker, and I'm going to be talking to you today about appreciative thinking in times of crisis. I am grateful that all of you could join me today, and am excited to talk to you about how you can build up your mindset skills during this time by thinking appreciatively, to teach that to others and use it for yourself in hopes that it will help you get through these uncertain times and find the positives and the benefits out of it. So I'm just going to give another minute to give people some time to sign in and to get settled, and then we will get started. But I really appreciate that you're all here. Fantastic. All right. Well, it looks like people are getting settled in. So once again, my name is Alexandra Walker, and I am a director at the Alliance for Community and Justice Innovation. I'm going to be talking to you about appreciative thinking in times of crisis, and this is really about building up your mindset skills and teaching you a skill and a strategy that you can use as we go through the next few days, weeks, months of this crisis so that we can be doing our best work during this time. So without further ado, let's get started. So I just want to take a minute and express some gratitude, first to my colleagues, Glenn Tapia, Johanna Lael, Allison Tapia, who without them, none of this would have been possible. So I appreciate you all deeply and love working with you. I also want to express some gratitude that you were all able to join me today. I know that your schedules are chaotic right now, and I hope that you really find this material and this strategy useful, something that you can put into practice right away. I'm truly honored to be surrounded by so many amazing and committed people who are doing their best to make their organizations and their communities better during this time. You all make me want to be better and stronger and do more. So know that I'm committed to you all, and we will work on this together. A couple logistics pieces. I want you to know that you can communicate with me through chat. I also have some coaches on the line that can answer questions along the way if I can't get to them. So use that chat function. It's in the toolbar, which should be along the bottom of your screen or on the right-hand side. You can talk with each other. You can ask questions. I might ask you to comment on some things. So make sure you have that up and ready. I'm also going to be asking you some poll questions. So don't go too far from your computer. I have some questions for you as well. Okay. The plan for today is to talk about change. Change is hard for us, and we're going to talk about why that is. We're going to talk about the emotional contagion and why it's essential that you understand what that is and how it can impact you and those around you in the next days, weeks, months. We're going to talk about appreciative inquiry just briefly so you have a framework, because appreciative thinking really comes from appreciative inquiry. And then I'm going to go through the examples that I talked about in the LinkedIn article. If you didn't have a chance to see it, that's okay. We're going to go deeper into those to talk about what that looks like in practice. I am so excited to see all of you. Hello, hello, Roger, Kayleen. I just want to say a friendly hello to those of you from WeWork. We're glad you could join us. And I'm just grateful and overwhelmed that we have people from Missouri and Kansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Virginia, Kentucky, Connecticut, Nebraska, Wisconsin, New York. I mean, this is just wonderful. Hello, Arizona. Hi, Nebraska, and Utah in the house. I love it. So welcome to everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be with me today. Please know that I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you while we're talking about this. So tell me what you think. You can reach us through our website at www.acji.org. And you can also email me directly if you want to keep talking about this or walk through some examples. My email is alexandra@acji.org. So thank you again for being here. And let's just start out with the check-in. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. So hopefully you're close to your computer. How are you feeling right now? Is today a good day? Is it better than yesterday? Are you feeling pretty frazzled, stressed? Just one day at a time. How's everybody doing? We'll get a quick check-in and see how everyone's feeling today. That's great. Fantastic. So oh, we still got some responses coming in. I want to give everyone a chance to answer. Let me share the results with you so you can all see how people are doing, right? Today's a good day for about a third of you, and I'm grateful to hear that. Better than yesterday, I'll take it, right? It sounds like some of you are feeling pretty frazzled and stressed, and many of you are just taking one day at a time. So know that we're all in this together, and hopefully the tools that we talk about today will be helpful for you. So many of you have heard me talk about this before, but as humans, we hate change. We really don't like it, even when we ask for it for ourselves. So if it's a New Year's resolution or we decided to change something about our day-to-day life, we naturally fight against change because we are creatures of habit. But there's a real reason why that is, and it's because of how our brains work and how much information we're processing on a day-to-day basis. So did you know that your brain, in your conscious mind, so the one that is conscious and aware of what's going on, is processing 40 frames of information every single minute? That means that in a 12-hour day, your brain is processing more than 28,000 frames of information throughout a single day. That's a lot of information. What I find most interesting, though, is that our subconscious or unconscious brains are processing 1.2 million frames of information every single minute. That is a tremendous amount of information. I don't have a calculator that has that many zeros, so I can't even tell you how much information that is. But as a result, our brain has to make some mental shortcuts in order for us to get through our day, in order for us to even choose what toothpaste to use or what to eat for breakfast. We cannot live in our cognitive brain all the time. It, one, makes us really grumpy. And two, there's just far too much information for us to process. So our brain creates mental models and templates. It logs our preferences, kind of like a computer does, and it makes assumptions for us so that we can get through our day-to-day tasks and activities. And what this leads to is our brains being hardwired for the status quo. We really like being able to function on autopilot and living in that status quo world where we have a pervasive preference for the current state of affairs. And by current, I might mean a few weeks ago current, not today current. But our brains are constantly fighting to get us back to what we feel comfortable with and what we're used to. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has kicked us out of autopilot into our cognitive brains, and our brains really aren't fans of that. And that's part of what's causing the anxiety and the stress that we're feeling as things are constantly changing and there's a lot of uncertainty. We're processing a ton of information. And if you're anything like me, I'm getting a barrage of emails and texts and phone calls, and my news feed options that they're sending me are just full of opportunities to fill my brain with pieces and parts of information that don't always fit together. And when our brain is missing information, it goes back to autopilot and fills those gaps with assumptions, preferences, stereotypes, things that we've learned and experienced in our past. And our default setting is for our brain to fill that in with negative assumptions, conspiracy theories, doom and gloom. So it's important that you know that that is kind of our default setting. And so even though we might find temporary relief by going for a walk or watching a silly cat video, maybe we read an article about how vitamin C and D might be helpful in this pandemic, or we just check in on Tom Hanks and his beautiful wife. Whatever that might be, our brains are going to push us back to getting back into those news feeds and processing all of this information. And it's going to fill in those gaps with doom and gloom. And that's really tricky for us in terms of how to stay positive, right? And how to focus on what we can control. So let me ask you a question. Here's another poll for you. Hopefully you can see that. There you go. When you what if a situation, when you're thinking about what if this happens or what if that happens, what's your natural tendency? Is it to think about the positive things that could happen, the neutral things that could happen, or the negative things that could happen? Go ahead and let me know what you think. What I want you to think about, though, is what is your natural tendency in a situation of unknown and uncertainty? Are you what ifing positives, negatives, neutrals? Let me share. Wow, you guys are really split. I love it. Let me share this with you. You guys are really split. So positive and negative with neutral in the middle. I'm assuming neutral means the what if it's both, right? And and that's really great. It sounds like a lot of you are working on your mindset, and that's super important. What we need to realize, though, is our natural default setting, unless we work and build those skills in our brain, is to default to the negative. It's to default to conspiracy theories, doom and gloom, and what could go wrong. And even a few weeks ago, our brains were doing that. But now that we have all this extra uncertainty, stress, and anxiety, it kind of kicks our brains into high gear. So our brain is a bit on overdrive, sifting through all this information, filling in gaps, and making it really difficult for us to manage some of those feelings of stress and uncertainty. So keep that in mind as we talk about the emotional contagion. So many of you have also heard me talk about this as well, but it's worth mentioning again because it's really important as we walk through this time together. More contagious than a sneeze. The emotional contagion is really a powerful thing where we share our emotions with others, even when we don't intend to. So we are constantly sending and receiving messages with one another without even realizing it. Our brains are connected on a sort of network where you're going to pick up my emotions, I'm going to pick up your emotions. And it's kind of like, I hate to say it, it's kind of like catching a cold, right? You catch people's emotions, you catch their feels. And this phenomenon, which is called the emotional contagion, has been in the research for about 50 or so, maybe a little bit more years. And there's tons of research that shows that even when we're not paying attention, we can catch the emotions of the people around us. Even when we're not talking to each other, we're not paying attention, it can transmit over the network without us ever being intentional about it. And this is really important because you can go about your day and catch feels from people, even virtually. In this webinar, on text, over email, in video calls, you're still catching feels from people, right? And I say feels lovingly because that's what my son says. But that's important to keep in mind. And if you are in a leadership role, it is so important for you to know that people who have perceived power dominate the emotional contagion, sending out messages that spread far faster than other folks in other positions and more powerfully than other folks in other situations. So it's really important as a leader, especially in times of crisis, that you are incredibly mindful of the emotions that you're sending out, that you're intentional about them because they can spread like wildfire and they can have a devastating impact on staff, engagement, productivity, and your culture. And those impacts on your culture are long lasting. They are very difficult to fix. So I want you to bring all of this together, right? Our brains are hardwired towards the negative, and we really don't like change. We are in the midst of change and uncertainty, right? Even though we didn't ask for it. Our emotions transmit over a network, especially when we're in leadership roles, and we are catching people's emotions, whether we want to or not. So those things coupled with a mindset approach that we're going to talk about today provides a real opportunity for you to put positivity out on that network, for you to focus on the opportunities and the gains that could be made here so that you and your staff can come out of this a little bit stronger, a little bit better, and a little bit more committed to each other through all of this. We're trying to counterbalance our default setting of doom and gloom. And all of this is to say, make sure that you're spreading your emotions responsibly. So let's unpack this appreciative thinking thing that we're going to talk about, and that starts with appreciative inquiry. So appreciative inquiry can be broken down into inquiry, which is to study something or be curious about something, and appreciative, which is not about recognition or gratitude in this particular sense, but rather focusing on what we value or what we want to grow in value. So when you put those two things together, you have a model that searches for the best in people, the best in organizations, and it's a strength-filled, opportunity-rich world that exists around them, and it's focusing on those opportunities that you're doing with appreciative inquiry. It's really not specific to organizational change or even crisis management, but rather a fundamental shift in our natural perspective on life. We have a tendency to be problem solvers, right? We look for the problem, figure out a solution, solve it, right? Appreciative inquiry is kind of pressing a reset. It's an opportunity to look for the opportunities and the strengths and the possibilities and the gains in a situation. And it creates a shared vision for what we want to grow together and where we can do better together. So with that as a framework, appreciative thinking is really teaching yourself and those around you how to think through every situation that comes your way and make an intentional choice about the mindset that you're going to take as it results to that particular situation. And so we're going to walk through some of these examples to highlight what that means. If you have questions along the way, I'd love to hear from you. So let me know what you're thinking. So the idea behind appreciative thinking is that in any given situation, you have three options. You have three ways that you can consider that situation. The first is depreciative. So that's focusing on the issues or the problems or the things that you don't want. This has a tendency to be our default setting because it's very rooted in our need to be creatures of habit and not really want to change. So depreciative thinking kind of cuts that off and says, I don't want to make any movement. I don't want to make any changes. So if you think about kind of one of those trigger people in your life, and I say that, or a trigger meeting or a trigger group, right? Someone or some project that you're working on that every time you go about getting started with it, you just think, oh, I really don't want to do this. I know this is going to be awful. It's going to take longer than I thought, or it's going to be negative and I don't want to do it, right? What kind of energy do you bring to a conversation with someone when you think that before you ever get there? What kind of energy are you going to bring to a project or to a meeting when before it starts, you're thinking, ugh, this is such a waste. I can't believe we're doing this. This is not worth my time, or it's full of problems, or we'll never solve anything. So tell me in the chat, what kind of energy would you be bringing if those were the thoughts that you had before you joined that project or that conversation? Thanks, Shane. Negative. I think you're absolutely right. You probably summed it up for everyone, right? Negative energy, defeated. Yes. Thank you, Carrie. Negative does attract negative. Very unproductive. Thank you, Philip. Right? Suppresses ideas. It's not coming from a place of building and growing, right? It's defeatist. It's giving up before you ever started. So very unproductive. Thanks, guys. So I think you all get the point, right? That depreciative thinking is a mindset choice around this is never going to change. We can never do any better than this. This is not something I want to spend my time on. Those types of thoughts. Neutral but supportive thinking is really not doing much to impact the situation for the positive or the negative. It's just getting through it, right? So it's this idea that we can make small changes that are kind of within our comfort zone. We're not making it worse, but we're not necessarily doing anything to really progress. So if you think back to that trigger conversation, meeting, project that you have, this would be just do your best, get through it, do what you have to do so that you can move on with your day, right? It's that neutral piece. So that neutral way of thinking is basically you're not being proactive, you're not being defeatist, you're just kind of staying in the middle, doing what you have to do to just get through. And if you can see in the chat to Jen's point, she's mentioning that it's interesting that people who are relatively neutral can be swayed either way. So if you think back to the emotional contagion, right, that's a big part of why people can get swayed. There's also conformity bias, right, where we have groupthink or we can be swayed one way or the other, but really we're sending out our emotions, our feelings about things, and other people are catching them, right? So we can really sway people by how we present problems, how we choose to think about problems, right? How we ask for feedback. We can really impact the way that it goes. Now, if we think about appreciative thinking, this is really about focusing on what we want to grow. Where are the opportunities? Where are the possibilities? And what choices can we make to support the people, the systems, the organizations, the communities, the cultures? What choices can we make to be supportive and proactive to help people through this time? I think James's question is really important. So before we dive into the examples, I just want to reference his question, which is, how do you maintain a sense of positive energy when there's a culture of negativity within an organization that you work for? That's really difficult, right? It is really difficult not to catch other people's emotions and feelings, especially when people are stuck in thinking depreciatively. What I would recommend is that you be intentional about your choices, right? There are very few things that we have control over, even less things it feels like today. But the important thing is to really focus on what you have control over, and that is the ability to teach other people how to think about problems, to bring awareness to them about how maybe they're choosing to be depreciative or choosing to be neutral, and being intentional about your choice about being appreciative. I have to tell you, since I learned this material and have been living it and trying to breathe it in my life, it has really made a profound impact. Not necessarily on everyone around me, but there have been some people who have been catching my feels. So I do think that there's opportunity here to teach people how to think through problems instead of just going to their default, which is usually depreciative, but can also be neutral, right? You really have to build the skills to get to a place where you're thinking appreciatively on the regular. So let's look at how this works out in practice. The first example that I talked about in the article was about information sharing. We have been bombarded by information. That information is changing, decisions are made, and then they're changing and then being remade and changing again. And that can be really difficult. It can be difficult to know, what should I share with people? What should I not share with people? And what should I do with that information? What has this been like for you? Tell me about it in the chat. What kind of information have you been getting through this process? Are you getting enough information? Have there been gaps in the information that you've received? Would you like more information? What has your experience been like? Share that with us in the chat. What I can tell you is most of the people that I'm hearing from have a lot of questions that are unanswered and are feeling really uncertain about it. And some of the folks that I talk to are feeling like people have more information than what they might be sharing. So I'm seeing that some of that information is inconsistent, there's gaps in it, right? Trying to figure out what's really happening and what's not. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm glad to hear that a lot of you are also getting some good information from particular people, right? And that might have a lot to do with their mindset and the choices that they're making about information sharing. So let's look at this from a depreciative thinking standpoint, right? When we were in the beginning of this crisis, maybe even just a few weeks ago, you might have been hearing on the news or from friends or coworkers that this is coming and we might have to work remotely, or what is this going to look like? You know, a lot of people were wondering, am I going to get laid off? Am I going to be able to work remotely? Do I still have to show up every day to a facility or to an office? What is my life going to look like, right? If you fast forward even a few days from there, then there are a lot of people now who have a new work life. They're working from home, they're feeling uncertain about their roles and their duties, experiencing technical glitches and frustrations, right? There's just a lot going on. So when you think about that situation from an information sharing perspective, depreciative thinking would be holding information really tight, right? And not giving it out, because information can be seen as dangerous. What if we say the wrong thing, make the wrong decision? What if we share something and it ends up not being true? There's a lot of fear in sharing of information that might end up to be different or not work out the way that you thought it was. And so it can be really easy for people to kind of default to, I'm only going to share what I have to, and we can justify that with a lot of different things, like I don't want people to panic, or I don't want people to worry, I don't want to preempt anything, so I'm going to only share what I have to share. And that can be really, really difficult for people. And we fill in gaps and create stories when that happens, right? When we don't have all the information we need, or when it's inconsistent and there are big gaps, or things feel really different than what maybe was said even just a few hours ago, we fill in those gaps with negative things in our head. And that's unfortunate, right? And can grow legs and walk away without any control. So it's really important that we think about the information and try to help people manage that. When we hear that changes are coming, but we don't have any information, we start to worry, right? There's no plan. Is it business as usual? Are they shut down? Are we doing these by phone? How is this going to work? We're working remotely now, and I'm really curious. I want you to answer this in the chat function. Now, if for those of you who are working remotely, or maybe you're half and half, right? You have some folks. What kinds of thoughts are you having about people when you don't hear from them or you don't know what they're doing? Have any of you made assumptions about what people are doing with their time? I'd love to hear what you think. I'm glad that people are thinking, I hope they're okay, right? That is definitely something to be thinking about. I think a lot of people also fill those gaps with, I wonder if they're working. Are they really doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? And it can be really difficult to not only manage this new work life if you are working remotely, but stay in communication and uh, and not get micromanagey, right? So a depreciative thinking process is one that would lead you to that, right? Information is dangerous. We're going to make assumptions about what people are doing with their time, and it can bring about a lot of negativity. It can be detrimental to your culture, to engagement. It can be really, really difficult. And keep in mind, with the emotional contagion, it can spread like wildfire, right? So let's look at neutral but supportive. Here, we're not necessarily being proactive. We're sharing what we're certain of, right? It's good enough. Here's everything that I know, but I'm not necessarily going to preempt any information down the road. I'm not trying to be proactive about this, but I'm certainly not trying to withhold information. So I'm going to tell you everything that I know, that I'm certain of, and wait to be certain before I share anything else. And so this type of thinking is not necessarily negative, but it's not necessarily positive, right? And it's what a lot of us are doing, is sharing information that we are certain of so that we can limit inconsistencies, but it also comes with a lot of gaps. So the third way of doing this, the appreciative way, is really embracing that people need information in order to thrive. When we don't have the information that we need, we fill in those gaps with negativity and doom and gloom and potential bad things that are coming down the pike, and that can be incredibly detrimental, especially in crisis. So from an appreciative thinking perspective, you'd be thinking about, what are the needs, challenges, fears of those around me, of the people who depend on me, and what kind of information can I share with them, even if I don't know if that's going to be true tomorrow, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, here's what I know today. I need you to know it might change tomorrow, but here's as transparent as I can be about what's happening. Give people the information, think about what their fears are, what they're worried about, and try to be proactive with that information. That is a mindset choice. It is a calculated risk to share information with people that you might not be certain of, but it can be really helpful for people who are struggling with the stress and anxiety that comes from this particular situation. People hear, the other thing to keep in mind is that people hear what they want to hear, right? So if there was ever a time for you to be a broken record, it would be right now. If you're in a leadership position, you need to think about what you want your staff to hear from you and then put yourself on repeat, because we have a tendency to filter out what we don't want to hear, or under stress we might not hear all of the things that you want us to hear. So make sure that you're sharing as much as possible, as often as possible. Let's look at a second example, and this is managing crisis as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. All of us have particular roles in our organizations and are trying to figure out our day-to-day work. We are faced with, how do we do business as usual? Can we do business as usual? What does this mean for referrals and intakes. Maybe you do assessments. How are you going to have meetings or face-to-face contacts with people? How are you going to uphold some of your policies and procedures that even 6 weeks ago were, business as usual? This is something that we are all challenged with during this pandemic. And there are a lot of moving parts, right? So there are 3 ways that you can think about each and every situation that comes up when you're asking yourself, well, how are we going to do X, whatever X might be? The depreciative thinking process would be that we're hostages to this crisis, that we can't do anything, kind of throw your hands up. There's no way that we can kind of get this done or figure this out. How we manage our day-to-day operations is a direct reflection of our mindset. And so that's really important, that if you are taking a depreciative mindset approach to managing the day-to-day operations of your organization, it's going to feel really overwhelming. You're going to feel out of control. The crisis already feels a bit out of control, right? And you're just going to stick with what you know. We're just going to keep functioning as normal. We're not going to change much of anything. We just have to hunker down and do what we can to stick with what we know. And if we have to give up, we give up, right? So that's the depreciative way of thinking. The neutral way of thinking is, let's get through this the best that we can, right? Remember, we're not necessarily being proactive, but we're not creating and fostering negativity or throwing our hands up in the air. So the neutral way of thinking is kind of, let's say it's about intakes, right? Maybe you print out the intake information, you put a box outside of your agency, or you print out paperwork that people need and you stick it in a box outside. And if they want to come get it, they can. The thing about the neutral but supportive way of thinking is that it really puts the onus on other people. And so we can say things like, well, we put it out there and they didn't come, right? That's not on us. We did our best and they didn't show up. And in this particular way of thinking, it would be, we're going to do the best we can and just ride this out for as long as possible. And that would be the neutral but supportive way. The appreciative thinking mindset here would really be about brainstorming how to maintain contact with people, how you can think through their needs, challenges, objectives, fears, and really what you can do for people. Being proactive to bring community back into what we're doing in terms of thinking about those around us and how we can help them. It's using our creativity and technology to increase connection during this time, right? Not thinking about how we can piecemeal it apart, but how can we increase our connection to others right now? What opportunities exist for us to really dive deep and help people during this crisis? How best can we engage folks? Not what's best for us, what's best for the people that we serve, and how can we engage them through this process so that we can come out of this a little bit better. It's a commitment to calling people regularly and asking what they need, providing support. I know of people who are teaching brief cognitive behavioral therapy to folks, or taking pictures of pressure points and texting them out so people know how to reduce their stress and anxiety. They're gathering ground level information about what people need, assessing things regularly, pivoting, right? Pivoting is a big part, and there's a lot of risk in pivoting, right? So with appreciative thinking, we're really taking some calculated risks, focusing on the long-term plan of taking care of each other and being proactive, not waiting for other people to kind of bring up ideas or do it for us, but rather being proactive to help serve those around us. And this really sounds like, what opportunities exist here for me to serve you? How can I help you? So let's look at that third example, which is dealing with unprecedented and sudden change, which is the COVID-19 pandemic in a nutshell. We probably all have some form of an emergency plan filed away somewhere. I bet if I asked you what it was, maybe you'd know today, but 6 weeks ago, you might not have known what it was, right? We filed it away somewhere, and no one could have ever predicted what's going on right now. And so people are really having to choose Am I going to risk being exposed, or am I going to risk my livelihood and that of my family, right? Communities are rallying to meet the needs that are going on for different people as millions of people have lost their jobs, businesses are closing. And this is truly something that we could have never planned for. As we look to our communities, we have facilities that are being asked to shelter in place, right, where people live. We're debating whether or not to release people from these facilities or have them stay. We are asking people to enforce what seems to be unenforceable. And our agencies and organizations have policies, procedures, rules, and regulations that are almost impossible to comply with today like they were 6 weeks ago. And so we're managing all of this through this pandemic. And at least as far as I'm concerned, sometimes it makes me want to run and hide, right? So I think this is an opportunity for us to really think through the different mindset approaches that we can take here, because we're all faced with this very problem. Depreciative thinking is running and hiding. It's putting your head in the sand, digging your heels into status quo and saying, these are the rules, we got to stick to them. You know, this will pass, and we just have to do what we know and stick with it. And it might seem like the easy choice, but it is devastating to culture and engagement and just humans and their needs in general. People get paralyzed in depreciative thinking. They don't want to make decisions, but don't be fooled. Whether you choose to make a decision or not, people are still struggling with the trade-offs that have to be made every day. Should I do this or should I do this? And you only have an opportunity to do one in some cases. So those trade-offs are happening anyway. So it's even better to just make the decision. But depreciative thinking says, you know, hold off, we're not going to do anything because that could be dangerous and we might make the wrong choice. Neutral, once again, we're putting the onus on others. We're willing to make small changes. It might sound like, well, we were going to do that anyway, so let's go ahead and get rid of it. Or we can stop doing X because we never did it in the first place. Those are kind of easy changes that don't have any meaningful impact, and it's often putting the onus on other people. We're not really doing anything on purpose to help. We're just kind of doing what we can do that feels really easy and quick. So that is the neutral but supportive place. With appreciative thinking, though, we're looking at the opportunities, the possibilities, the gains. We are being proactive instead of reactive, and we are committing to doing what we can so that it's less work for those around us. What can I do so that you don't have to do it? How can I help support you, right? So if you think about neutral but supportive, that's still putting the box outside, right? We printed out the stuff. If you come get it, you know, you should come get it if you need it. Whereas appreciative thinking is, let me fill it out for you, right? Let me find a way to make this easy for you because I think it could be helpful. So that is the appreciative thinking approach. So how does this work in practice? These challenges are all interconnected, right? It's hard to piecemeal them out. But when you're isolated and you're lacking information and you're waiting on decisions, all those gaps create opportunities for people to think negatively, to increase their stress and anxiety, right? And to fill all those gaps with potential doom and gloom, worst case scenarios. But our creativity can be in our control, right? We have the ability to use that creative brain that we have that can come up with a million things that could go wrong and use it for what could be good about all of this. It takes just as much effort to use that creativity for what if something is possible here? What if there's an opportunity for us to do better? We can take control of our brain and focus on what we want. Every situation is an opportunity. Depreciative thinking rarely brings about solutions, right? And it can have a tremendous negative impact on our culture. Neutral thinking, status quo, and usually puts the onus on other people to do things. Appreciative thinking can help us think about where our opportunities are to do better, to help each other, and to commit to that type of thinking. And I want to make sure that I point this out, if you take nothing else away, that appreciative thinking is a skill, right? This is something that you have to work at. It is a commitment to think through every situation and be really clear with yourself. I could think about this depreciatively, and that would sound like this. I could think about this from a neutral perspective, and that would sound like this. I could think about this from an appreciative perspective, and that would sound like this. And then commit to your choice, right? It's a skill, it takes practice. And it's important to weigh out all your options and then be intentional. You might not always be able to think appreciatively in a situation, and that's okay. Just know what your options are and then commit to your choice. The other thing I would say is that this can have the most impact if you're sharing it with others. In every meeting that you have, in every strategy session that you're having, that you're saying, okay, what are our options here? Right? We've got status quo, we could make it worse or do nothing, or we could look for opportunities and try those out. So the other thing to say here is that it's okay to tell people that you want to run and hide. It's okay if you wish that someone else could make this decision for you. I'm right there with you. We're all in this together, right? And we all wish that someone could give us a checklist on what to do in this situation so that we'll all be okay. At the end of the day, being honest and authentic and vulnerable is not a bad thing, right? And then commit to your choice. And then make sure that you're trying to do the best that you can do for yourself and those around you, because it's really important to everybody. You're sending that out on the network. And it's because of this that you can actually influence people's hearts and minds. When you influence people's hearts, when you teach them how to think through situations, instead of focusing on, are you doing the work? Did you get this project done? Are you checking this box? You can help people learn how to think through situations that support you, support your organization, support your intention, put less focus on monitoring behavior, and you really focus in on what people need, right? And how to help people through this crisis. My hope for you all is that you focus on the opportunities and you try to build on them through this. No matter your title, the number of people you feel responsible for, the number of types of decisions that you have to make, this is stressful for everybody. And so don't forget to give a little grace, have a little extra forgiveness during this time, and be a little bit more thoughtful about those around you. We have control over whether we're present, productive, and positive through this time, as hard as it is. And even more than that, we can be intentional about the mindset that we're going to choose to have through this crisis, that we can stay focused on where the opportunities are, on the things that we value from each other, on the things that we want to do better at, right? That we want to grow, and commit to doing that through this crisis so that we come out of this a little bit stronger, a little bit better, and more committed to each other than ever before. That's really my hope for all of us in this. So with that, I hope this information was helpful for you. If you have questions, I'm here. You can send them through the chat. I would love to talk with all of you. If you want to send me an email, we can talk through this more, or certain situations that you have. You can contact us through our website as well, acji.org. You're so welcome, everybody. Arlo, it was great to see you. Julie, Katina, I mean, I'm just thrilled that you could all join us today. And when you sign off of the webinar today, you're going to be asked to fill out a survey. So let us know what you think, and if there's other topics you'd like us to discuss that would be helpful for you, then we can do this again together. So it was so great to have you all here. I hope it's helpful and that you can use it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Stay in touch, stay healthy, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time. Take care.